Undertale is an amazing game full of surprising ideas that goes beyond the realm of traditional RPGs. Since I've defeated the game's hardest boss a couple of weeks ago, I've been thinking about it a lot. And I decided to make this video in order to share with you why I've been so obsessed with the fight and why I think it's actually one of the best bosses in any RPG. Before we delve into today's topic, obviously I will be spoiling a lot about Undertale, so if you haven't played the game already, first of all, what are you doing? And second, go ahead and do that right away. The hardest boss of Undertale, Sans, can be only fought in the genocide run of the game. This run requires the player to kill every monster in every area of the game, including bosses, of course. For such a combat-heavy way to play the game, the difficulty is fairly low overall. There's basically two hard bosses, Undyne and Sans. Aside from some foreshadowing here and there, players have no way to gauge how strong Sans actually is. Throughout the game, it will actually tell the player to watch his actions because something bad might happen. However, for a lot of players, myself included, nothing can prepare you for the opening attack. Oh my god. I'm gonna wreck your face right now. This introductory attack sets the tone for the fight in more ways than one. First, of course, this won't be an easy one. This won't be a fight like Toriel or Metaton Neo. You will need to put some work into it. This attack also does something very interesting. It gives you a summary of the types of attack Sans will be using throughout the whole fight. Let's delve a bit deeper into that statement, shall we? So the fight opens with your heart being blue, which means, of course, that you will be affected by gravity. And then suddenly a row of bones come out from the bottom of the screen. Your heart immediately switches to a free-roaming red heart, and then there are two wavy rows of bones that you need to dodge. And finally, you got 4 different patterns of laser skulls. And just like that, in about 10 seconds, you know what the majority of Sans attacks will look like for the rest of the whole fight. Of course, a lot of his attacks uses different patterns that you will need to learn in order to win, but the core mechanics is shown in the first 10 seconds of the fight. This is pretty cool because it allows players to understand these attacks when they come up way later in the fight. This initial onslaught will probably kill a lot of players on their first try. And here I want to talk about one of my favorite aspects of the fight. Its difficulty. Difficult encounters are nothing new in games. JRPGs had them for the longest time, allowing players who've mastered the game to seek out formidable foes and challenges. Final Fantasy VII has the various weapons, Final Fantasy X has Penance, Dragon Quest VIII has the Dragovian Lord, and the excellent Persona 5 has... Well, I won't spoil it because the game is fairly recent and it would be a kind of a spoiler, so I'm not going to spoil that one. All these fights have something in common though. They require the player hours upon hours of grinding in order to even stand a chance of surviving the opening round. Get to level 99, grab some ribbons for all your party members to be able to be immune to status effects, set up your gambits perfectly in order to deal with a several hours long fight on a console that didn't have a suspend and resume feature. But in Undertale, none of that is required. The game even taunts you before the fight by giving you the best weapon and armor of the game. 99 attack and 99 armor respectively, which is way higher statistically than the items that you had equipped previously. However, equipment doesn't matter. Sans will always deal 1 HP worth of damage to you. The thing is, you have no invincibility frames. Furthermore, his attacks deal karma damage, which is basically poison damage. You got 99 defense, bro? Cool. Doesn't matter. Well, that's okay, because you have that awesome 99 attack dagger, right? Well, when you finally manage to survive Sans' opening attack, and also assuming you don't spend the next several rounds desperately healing yourself, you are finally ready to launch your first attack. You highlight that attack button, and you try to deal your first blow to Sans. And what happens? He dodges. This is the only time in the whole game that an enemy dodges one of your attacks. Nice 99 attack dagger, bro. It's gonna be really useful. My point here is that there is no trick to this fight. There is no exploit, no leveling required. You can't acquire certain items that will allow you to bypass certain mechanics. You can't summon Yojimbo to one-shot your foes. You can't set up a series of actions that will automatically deal with the fight for you. There is only one thing. There is one thing you need to do. You need to get good. Sans, as I mentioned several times already, is a very difficult fight. However, there are several things that Toby, the main designer of the game, did here to make this fight bearable. First, we can't talk about fight difficulty without delving a bit into flow theory. Let me show you one graph. Flow theory is basically a graphical representation of the zone in which you want to keep the players for all their time with your game. This side represents the challenge you present to the players, while the other represents the player's skills. Making a game is all about balancing the challenge and the expected player skills in order to keep him in a state that we call the flow. Ever played a game and then felt totally in sync with what was happening on the screen? Masterfully overcoming all the obstacles in your way while being barely aware of what your fingers were inputting on your controller or keyboard? That's the flow, baby. Too little challenge and you become bored. AKA me trying to play any Pokemon game in the last decade. God damn. And too great a challenge and you become frustrated and you quit. AKA me trying to play those crazy hard Mario Maker's levels. No. Sans being a hard fight really pushes players towards the being too difficult end of the spectrum. However, there are several things that Toby does here in this fight that prevents, in my humble opinion, the fight from being too difficult. The first thing that he does that I think is really cool is that he taunts you through Sans. Initially, Sans will count the number of times you died when you walk back from the save point and talk to him. That teasing was implemented in the game, right? So that means that Toby knew that players were likely to hit a wall at that point. So yes, the game is taunting you, but also it is letting you know that that was predictable. Your deaths were pretty much inevitable. You will die a lot, and that's okay. It's also an interesting attempt at trying to keep players engaged into that really difficult content. If you're a fan of the game's narrative, you might not even be mad about dying repeatedly because you just want to know what Sans will keep on saying to you. Another very interesting design decision that Toby made is to have Sans avoid all the attacks except the very last one. One way players are able to gauge if a fight is going well is, of course, by looking at the boss's HP bar. When I was fighting Undyne repeatedly and dying repeatedly, at least I could visually see on the screen that I was making some progress, right? I was downing her HP bar more and more every attempt that I made. So when I died and I had only like 1 or 2 hits left, I was definitely like, oh, I can do this. I just need to get just a little bit better. But Sans doesn't give you that satisfaction. At first, it's incredibly hard to gauge if you're making any progress or not. You have this huge mountain to climb and you can't even see the peak. I will come back to the difficulty of the fight later, but for now, I need to talk about defying conventions. Sans fight is also incredible when it comes to defying conventions, be it from its own genre or even from its own game. This is first apparent when players reaches a point in which music calms down and then he spares you. This is an opportunity players will recognize instantly. In Undertale, when a character spares you, that means that if you attack them, you will kill them in one blow. All signs point to this fight being finally over. Excited, you move over to the fight option, hit that peg right in the middle of that weird eye looking thing, and miss. This is very well done. However, I must admit, I did not think that was funny the first time. On top of everything that has been going on in the fight up until that point, Toby goes ahead and makes you think you've won, and then at the last instant, he takes it away from you. The game just broke its own rule, which normally would be considered bad in game design. A game has rules and it must follow them in order to guide players through the end. But in that case of this final hard challenge, it's actually very, very cool that it does that. Oh, also, the fight gets harder from this point on. After surviving some more difficult attacks, but that still follow the same core mechanics as that first attack that we talked about earlier, remember? The game drops something on you that I had never experienced in all my years of playing RPGs. There are actual attacks in the menu. What? That bone attacks me in the menu? I found this to be incredible. Usually, you only need to be very alert during Sans' attack phase. But having a threat in the menu shifts the cadence of the fight tremendously. Even more so later on, where rows of bones will actually be on top of the options that you can choose at the bottom of the screen. This is thinking outside the box, defying the traditional conventions of any turn-based RPG out there. And it's genius. The game removes one of your only safe havens during this difficult fight. It forces you to keep a certain rhythm while you're not being attacked, keeping you engaged and increasing the difficulty of the fight just a little more. Then Sans tricks you one more time. For several turns, he talks about a special attack. Then, when push comes to shove, he's telling you that he's about to use his special attack. If you can survive that last attack first. And boy, that last, totally not a special attack. Now, watching this video, you might ask yourself why I brought up flow theory earlier in this video. Isn't this fight so hard that it goes into the too difficult category of that graph? Well, maybe for some. But I feel like there was a lot of thought put into how difficult this fight should be. Making difficult encounters is very easy. Going overboard with a design and making it almost impossible to win, that is not a challenge. In fact, most designers, when they start their career, usually tend to make things too difficult. Because when you know how your design works, you try to stack the chances against the player in order to make him interact with all the core mechanics that you have in order to win. But the thing is, players don't know your design inside and out like you do. It actually requires a lot of iteration most times to bring the challenge of a fight to an acceptable level. And here I think Toby showed a lot of restraints, and he also guides the player consistently throughout the fight instead of just expecting him to just crash into the mechanics of the fight repeatedly. The opening attack, which shows a lot of the mechanics you will encounter during that fight, is a good example. The very first attack is a pattern that only shows up later in phase 2. The row of bones is something that is shown only in phase 2 at the end. So Toby set out to create a difficult encounter, yes, but also, without even you knowing, he's on your side. He's trying to make you win that fight. I also think this shows in the final moments of the fight. Right before Sans launches his penultimate attack, he warns the player that if they survive this, then he's going to perform his special attack. At this point, he's been teasing it for a couple of turns. So you just keep your head down and you head into that penultimate attack. This attack starts off normally, but then it merges two different ones that aren't usually paired. At this moment, you know something is wrong. Then the combat box widens, leaving you time to understand that this is gonna hit differently. What? Oh! This is the most difficult attack to get through. And Sans told you that this is not even his special attack. After surviving this crazy onslaught, you have no juice left for whatever Sans' special attack will be. And his special attack is... it's nothing. It's literally nothing. That's right. Sans here breaks the fourth wall and says that he's gonna do Nothing. It's an RPG. If it's never your turn, you can never attack. So you will never win. Thinking outside the box. This is another example, just like using bones in the menu to hurt the player when it's not Sans turn, to think outside normal conventions of the genre. No other turn-based RPG plays with the established formula like Undertale. And then Toby pushes the genre forward even more by having the player push the playable box down over the attack button in order to select it and finally launch the last attack on Sans. This is so smart. You attack Sans and then you miss. But before you have time to shout at your screen, your character lands another quick hit and Sans gets one shot. And just like that, all that tension that Toby was building throughout the fight, just like that, in an instant, it's gone. Going back to the flow theory one last time before finishing up. Toby made a hard fight. The goalpost, which is to defeat Sans, is moved one time when you first try to attack him and you miss. The goalpost is then moved one last time in the transition between phase 1 and phase 2 when Sans spares you, because you try to hit him and it doesn't work. The goalpost could have been moved again. After that penultimate attack, which is basically the hardest attack in the fight, there could have been another attack. What if Sans had a truly devastating special attack after that? What if that final attack did not hit Sans and then you had a phase 3? But I think this is where you see the genius in Toby's design. He didn't set out to create an overly difficult boss that feels unfair. I think he set out to create a memorable boss fight that, yes, is difficult, but is ultimately fair to everyone while shattering RPG conventions. It is, without a doubt, one of the best boss fights I've ever played in my life. Alright guys, so that is all for me today. I hope you liked the video. It's a bit different than what I'm used to, so it took me a long time to write and edit and all that stuff. But hey, I hope you liked it. If you want to reward me for my efforts, all I'm asking is to leave a like down in the description below. Also, if you like my content and want to watch me, do some Let's Plays, go ahead and subscribe. Also, if you want to see my Undertale playthrough, there's going to be a link down in the description below. The game turned out to be way better than I expected, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Alright guys, and on that note, I'm going to see you in another video. Have a good one.